Hey, and welcome to Puzzlehead. This channel is all about engaging stories with clever twists, unexpected turns, and moments that will pull you in emotionally. So, if you enjoy drama, surprises, and endings that truly hit, then you're in the right place. Subscribe and join us for stories full of secrets, intense moments, and satisfying outcomes. Now, don't forget to turn on notifications. The next puzzle is about to begin. I was in the shower, trying to loosen dried blood from my hair after her son accidentally hit me with a broomstick over the last slice of pizza. My wife leaned in and whispered, "Next time, don't flinch. Maybe he'll aim for your throat." I got angry and said nothing. This morning, my phone was full of missed calls. They were begging me to pick up, but let me back up. My name is David Chen. No, wait, scratch that. David Miller. And 18 months ago, I thought I'd found my happy ending with Sandra Walsh and her 15-year-old son Tyler from her previous marriage. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. The hot water ran pink down the drain as I worked my fingers through the matted hair above my left ear. The scalp had split clean. Tyler had good aim for a kid who claimed it was an accident. Downstairs, I could hear him laughing with his friends, probably bragging about nailing the old man over a piece of pizza. "Marcus?" Sandra's voice cut through the steam. She'd slipped into the bathroom without knocking, something that used to feel intimate. Now it just felt invasive. "It's David," I corrected automatically. She'd been calling me Marcus for weeks now, the name of her ex-husband, Tyler's real father, the one who'd walked out when Tyler was 12. She stepped closer to the shower door, her silhouette blurred through the frosted glass. "You need to stop being so dramatic about these little accidents." Little accidents. That's what she called the broken finger from when Tyler slammed the car door on my hand, the black eye from his thrown Xbox controller during a friendly gaming session, the cracked rib from what she described as innocent horseplay in the backyard. "Boys will be boys," she continued, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "Maybe if you didn't provoke him." "I asked for one slice of pizza." The words came out sharper than I intended. One slice from the pizza I paid for. Sandra was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned closer to the shower, close enough that I could see her face clearly through the glass. Her smile was cold, calculating. "Next time, don't flinch," she whispered. "Maybe he'll aim for your throat." The bathroom door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone with the pink water swirling down the drain. What Sandra didn't know, what she'd forgotten to ask in the 18 months we'd been married, was that I'd spent 12 years as a trauma nurse before switching to home renovation. I knew exactly what I was looking at when I photographed each injury. I knew the patterns, the escalation, the careful choreography of systematic misuse, and I'd been documenting everything. My phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. Another missed call from Sandra's sister Jenny, who'd been Tyler's biggest cheerleader since day one. Then Pete, my old drinking buddy, who'd slowly started avoiding me after Sandra convinced him I was unstable. Then Sandra's best friend Carla, who'd stopped inviting us to dinner parties after Tyler broke her antique vase and I'd suggested he pay for it. 41 missed calls total, all from people who'd spent months telling me I was overreacting, that I needed to be more understanding, that blending families was hard work. I turned off the water and reached for my towel, careful not to aggravate the split in my scalp. In the mirror, I could see the faint scar above my right eyebrow from Tyler's accidental elbow 3 months ago, the slightly crooked set of my pinky finger from the car door incident, the yellow remnants of bruising along my ribs, a portfolio of accidents that any emergency room nurse would recognize in a heartbeat. But here's what none of them knew. This house, the house Sandra and Tyler had moved into after our wedding, was mine. Inherited from my grandmother, owned free and clear for 15 years before I'd ever met Sandra Walsh, my name on the deed, my property taxes, my rules, and as of yesterday morning, my security cameras. I'd spent the weekend installing them while Sandra took Tyler to visit his father upstate. Professional-grade equipment, the kind I'd learned to set up during my renovation work for paranoid suburban clients. Motion-activated, night vision, cloud storage backup. Tyler's attack with the broomstick, recorded in high definition. Sandra coaching him from the kitchen doorway, telling him to make it look accidental. Crystal clear audio, her whispered threat about aiming for my throat. Every word captured and uploaded to a secure server. I dressed carefully, avoiding the tender spot on my scalp, and made my way downstairs. Tyler was sprawled on the couch with 2 friends, empty pizza boxes scattered across my coffee table. He looked up when I entered, his eyes bright with the kind of satisfaction that comes from a job well done. "Hey, David," he said, not bothering to sit up. "Sorry about earlier. Didn't see you there." His friends snickered. One of them, A kid named Josh, who'd been coming around more often lately, was recording with his phone, probably for social media, probably another humiliation I was supposed to ignore. No problem, I said evenly. Accidents happen. Tyler's grin widened. He thought he was winning. My phone buzzed again. Sandra, calling from her real estate office downtown. I let it go to voicemail just like the other 40 calls. You gonna answer that? Tyler asked. Mom's been trying to reach you all day. I'm sure she has. I walked to the kitchen and opened the cabinet where I kept my important papers. Behind the insurance documents and warranty cards was a fireproof safe installed last month while Sandra was showing houses to clients. Inside, medical photographs of every injury, time-stamped and cataloged, screenshots of Sandra's dismissive text messages, audio recordings of Tyler's jokes about hurting me, and now, high-definition video of this morning's attack. 18 months of evidence, organized with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent years documenting trauma for court cases. My phone rang again. This time it was Pete. David, man, you need to call Sandra back, he said without preamble. She's freaking out, says you've been acting weird, not answering calls. I've been busy. Busy with what? She says Tyler's upset, thinks you're mad at him over some pizza thing. Some pizza thing, I repeated the words slowly. Pete, do you remember what I used to do for a living? A pause. You were a nurse or something, right? Before the construction stuff? Trauma nurse. 12 years in emergency rooms. You know what I learned in 12 years of treating attack sufferers? Another pause, longer this time. David, what are you talking about? I learned to recognize patterns, escalation, the difference between accidents and intent. Jesus, David, are you saying? I'm not saying anything. I'm documenting everything. I hung up and turned off the phone. In the living room, Tyler and his friends were getting louder, emboldened by my apparent passivity. One of them had found Sandra's wine in the refrigerator and was passing it around. Let them drink. Let them celebrate. Let them think they were winning, because tomorrow morning everything was going to change. The dried blood had finally washed away, but the pattern was clear as day once you knew how to look for it. I spent that night in my home office, door locked, organizing 18 months of evidence with the same methodical care I'd once used to chart patient symptoms. Each incident had been photographed with medical precision, proper lighting, ruler for scale, detailed notes about mechanism of injury and healing progression. Tyler's first accident had happened 3 weeks after Sandra and I returned from our honeymoon, a basketball to the face during what Sandra called bonding time in the driveway. The impact pattern was wrong for an accidental throw, too low, too direct, too much spin, but I'd been new to stepfatherhood, eager to make it work. The second incident came a month later. Tyler was helping me move furniture, and somehow a dresser drawer slipped from his hands and caught my shin. The bruising was spectacular, deep purple spreading from ankle to knee. Sandra had laughed it off, said Tyler was clumsy like his father. By the 6th month, the accidents were happening weekly. A rake handle to the ribs while we cleaned the yard. A door slammed on my fingers when I was carrying groceries. A skateboard left at the top of the stairs that sent me tumbling down 6 steps and cracked 2 ribs. Each time, Sandra had an explanation. Tyler was adjusting to having a new father figure. He was acting out because of his parents' divorce. He was just a physical kid who didn't know his own strength. Each time, I documented everything with clinical detachment. Photographs, measurements, detailed descriptions of the mechanism of injury. Old habits from the trauma bay, where accurate documentation could mean the difference between conviction and acquittal in attack cases. What I hadn't realized until this morning was that Sandra wasn't just enabling Tyler's behavior, she was directing it. The security footage was damning. Tyler approaching me with the broomstick, looking back toward the kitchen for approval. Sandra nodding, making a gesture with her hands to indicate where he should aim. The satisfied smile on her face when I went down, and then her whispered threat in the bathroom, delivered with the cold precision of someone who'd been planning this escalation for months. My phone had finally stopped ringing around midnight. 47 missed calls total, from Sandra, Tyler, Jenny, Pete, Carla, and half a dozen other people who'd somehow gotten involved in whatever story Sandra was spinning about my sudden unavailability. I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the hours before dawn researching domestic violence statutes, documentation requirements, and the legal process for obtaining emergency protective orders. My nursing background had taught me the medical side of misuse recognition. Now I needed to understand the legal mechanics. At 6 a.m., I called the police. I need to report an ongoing pattern of domestic attack, I told the dispatcher. I have extensive documentation and video evidence. Officer Rebecca Martinez arrived 40 minutes later, a compact woman with tired eyes who'd clearly handled her share of domestic calls. She looked around my kitchen with professional assessment, taking in the pristine counters, the organized cabinets, the complete absence of the chaos that usually accompanied these situations. "You said you have documentation?" she asked, settling into a chair across from my kitchen table. I opened my laptop and pulled up the files. 18 months of photographs, organized by date and severity, medical records from my doctor visits, screenshots of text message conversations with Sandra dismissing each incident. Officer Martinez scrolled through the images with growing attention. "You're very thorough," she said finally. "What's your background?" "Trauma nurse, 12 years before I switched to renovation work." That got her attention. "So you know what you're looking at." "I know exactly what I'm looking at. Systematic misuse with clear escalation patterns. And as of yesterday, I have video evidence of the perpetrator coaching the minor child on how to make the attacks look accidental." I showed her the security footage from the pizza incident, Tyler's glance toward the kitchen for approval, Sandra's directing gestures, the satisfied nod when I went down. Then I played the audio from the bathroom. "Next time, don't flinch. Maybe he'll aim for your throat." Officer Martinez sat back in her chair. "Mr. Miller, I have to ask, why didn't you report this sooner?" "Because until yesterday, I thought Tyler was acting out and Sandra was just making excuses for him. I didn't realize she was orchestrating it until I saw her coaching him on camera." "And you're certain this house is in your name only?" "Inherited from my grandmother 15 years ago. Sandra and Tyler moved in after we married, but they have no legal claim to the property." She nodded and closed her laptop. "I'm going to need you to come to the station and file a formal report. Bring all your documentation. Given the video evidence and the threat about escalating to potentially lethal violence, we can probably get you an emergency protective order by this afternoon." "What about Tyler? He's a minor." 15 is old enough for attack charges, especially with this level of documentation. And if we can prove his mother was directing the attacks, she'll face conspiracy charges and child endangerment. I felt something I hadn't experienced in 18 months. Hope. "There's one more thing," I said. "They don't know about the cameras yet. Sandra and Tyler are both at work and school. If you need additional evidence, we'll need to search the property with a warrant," Officer Martinez said. "But given what you've shown me, that shouldn't be a problem." She left with copies of my documentation and a promise to call within 2 hours. I spent the time changing the locks on all the doors and boxing up Sandra and Tyler's belongings. Not out of spite, though I won't lie and say it didn't feel satisfying, but because the protective order would require them to stay away from the property. My phone started ringing again around 9 a.m., Sandra calling from her office. This time I answered. "David, what the hell is going on?" Her voice was sharp with panic. "I've been trying to reach you since yesterday. Tyler says you've been acting weird, and now Jenny says you hung up on Pete." "Sandra, I need you to listen very carefully. I've filed attack charges against Tyler and conspiracy charges against you. There's a protective order being processed that will require both of you to stay away from this property." Silence. Then, "What are you talking about? Tyler never attacked anyone. Those were accidents. I have video footage of you coaching him on how to aim the broomstick." Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely. Gone was the panic, replaced by cold calculation. "You can't prove anything. It's your word against ours, and Tyler's just a kid. No one's going to believe." "I have 18 months of medical documentation, Sandra. Professional quality photographs of every injury, time-stamped and cataloged. I have your text messages dismissing each incident. I have audio recordings of Tyler joking about hurting me. And now I have high-definition video of yesterday's attack, including your coaching and your threat about aiming for my throat." "You were recording us? In our own home?" "My home. My name on the deed. My right to install security cameras on my own property." The silence stretched out so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, "David, we can work this out. Tyler's been having a hard time adjusting." "The police will be in touch," I said, and ended the call. By noon, Officer Martinez called back. The emergency protective order had been approved. Sandra and Tyler had until 6 p.m. to collect essential items from the house under police supervision before the order took effect. "We'll also be executing a search warrant for additional evidence," she said. "Your security system covers the whole house? Every room except the bathrooms and bedrooms? Motion activated, cloud storage backup. Perfect. We'll need access to all of it." I spent the afternoon watching 18 months of accidents play out on high-definition video. Tyler's attacks, captured from multiple angles, Sandra's coaching, clearly visible and audible, the satisfaction on both their faces when I went down. The pattern was undeniable, the escalation was obvious, and the threat about aiming for my throat was recorded in crystal clarity. At 5:30, Sandra's car pulled into the driveway, followed by a police cruiser. Through my window, I watched her face when she saw the boxes of belongings stacked on the front porch, the confusion, then anger, then something that looked almost like fear. Tyler got out of the passenger seat, still wearing his school clothes, looking around with the bewildered expression of someone whose world had just shifted beneath his feet. Officer Martinez approached my front door while her partner supervised Sandra and Tyler's collection of their belongings. "Mr. Miller, we're going to need you to stay inside while they gather their things. The protective order takes effect at 6 p.m. sharp." I watched from my living room window as Sandra and Tyler loaded their boxes into her car. Sandra kept looking up at the house, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't quite read. Tyler just looked confused, like he couldn't understand how his favorite game had suddenly stopped being fun. At exactly 6 p.m., Officer Martinez knocked on my door. "It's done," she said. "They're gone. The protective order is in effect for 30 days initially, with a hearing scheduled for next week to determine if it should be extended." "What happens now?" "Now we build the case. Your documentation is excellent and the video evidence is damning. The district attorney is confident we can make both charges stick." After she left, I walked through my house slowly, room by room. It felt different already, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the air itself. In the bathroom, I turned on the shower and let the water run hot. This time it ran clear from the first drop. No blood, no threats, no whispered promises of escalating violence. Just clean water, finally warm enough to wash away 18 months of carefully documented hell. The house felt different without the constant undercurrent of menace. I'd grown so accustomed to the hypervigilance, listening for Tyler's footsteps, watching for objects that might accidentally become weapons, anticipating Sandra's dismissive explanations, that the silence felt almost unnatural. But it wasn't really silent. My phone had started ringing again at 7 a.m., and this time the calls were coming from people I'd almost forgotten existed. "David, what the hell is going on?" Jenny's voice was shrill with indignation. "Sandra called me crying, saying you've lost your mind and filed false police reports. She says you threw them out of their own home over some imaginary—" I hung up and blocked her number. Pete called 10 minutes later. "Man, I don't know what Sandra did, but kicking out a kid seems pretty harsh. Maybe you guys could work this out in counseling or something." Block. Carla was next, her voice dripping with the kind of righteous anger that comes from hearing only one side of a story. "I always knew you had control issues, David, but this is insane. Tyler's just a child, and Sandra's been nothing but patient with your paranoia." Block. By noon, I'd blocked 8 numbers and turned off my phone entirely. Let them call. Let them leave voicemails full of secondhand outrage and moral superiority. They'd all had 18 months to notice the pattern, to ask questions, to show even minimal concern for the escalating accidents that kept landing me in urgent care. Instead, they'd chosen to believe Sandra's narrative, that I was oversensitive, dramatic, unable to handle the normal rough and tumble of teenage behavior. That I was the problem. Well, now they'd find out exactly what the problem really was. Officer Martinez arrived at 2 p.m. with Detective Sarah Coleman, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who specialized in domestic violence cases. They spent 3 hours going through my security footage, documenting each incident with the same methodical precision I'd used for the medical evidence. "This is some of the most comprehensive documentation I've seen in 20 years, Detective Coleman said, scrolling through months of video evidence. "You've essentially created a complete behavioral profile of systematic misuse." "It's what I was trained to do," I said. "In the trauma bay, documentation is everything. The difference between a conviction and a dismissed case often comes down to the quality of the evidence." She paused the video on a frame showing Tyler mid-swing with a baseball bat, ostensibly aiming for a practice target, but clearly angled toward where I was standing. Sandra was visible in the background, gesturing with her hands to indicate trajectory. "How long do you think this has been planned?" Detective Coleman asked. "I think it started as Tyler acting out, and Sandra saw an opportunity. She's a real estate agent. She's good at reading people, manipulating situations to her advantage. She probably realized that if she could make me look unstable or abusive, she'd have grounds for divorce that would give her claim to the house. Except the house is in your name only." "Right. But if she could establish a pattern of me being violent or unstable, she could argue that Tyler needed protection, that she needed to stay in the house for his safety. Family court judges are sympathetic to that kind of argument. Detective Coleman nodded. So the escalation serves two purposes. It makes you look increasingly unstable as you react to the misuse, and it builds toward a justification for her to claim the house. That's my theory. The threat about aiming for my throat suggests they were building towards something that would require hospitalization, maybe something that would affect my mental capacity, give her grounds to claim I was unfit. Jesus, Officer Martinez looked up from her notes. That's sociopathic. It's methodical, I corrected. Sandra's not crazy. She's calculating. Detective Coleman closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. Mr. Miller, I have to ask, do you have somewhere safe to stay while this plays out? If your theory is correct, Sandra's not going to take this quietly. This is my home. I'm not going anywhere. I understand that. But you've just dismantled what sounds like an 18-month plan to take everything you own. That's going to make some people very desperate. As if summoned by her words, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Sandra standing on my front porch, still wearing her work clothes, but looking disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. Her usually perfect hair was mussed, her makeup smudged. She looked like someone whose world was falling apart. Police are here, I called through the door. You're violating the protective order. I just want to talk. Her voice was strained, almost pleading. David, please, we can fix this. Tyler's scared. He doesn't understand what's happening. Detective Coleman appeared beside me at the door. Mrs. Walsh, you need to leave immediately. You're in violation of a court order. You don't understand, Sandra said, her voice rising. He's making this all up. Those weren't attacks. They were accidents. Tyler's just a clumsy kid, and David's been getting more and more paranoid. Ma'am, we have video evidence of you coaching your son on how to aim his attacks. We have audio recordings of you threatening to escalate to potentially lethal violence. You need to leave now, or you'll be arrested for violating the protective order. Through the peephole, I watched Sandra's face cycle through emotions, confusion, anger, fear, and finally something that looked like calculation. She was trying to figure out how much we actually knew, how strong the evidence really was. I want to see the videos, she said finally. If you're going to destroy my family based on some security footage, I have the right to see what you think you have. You'll see everything during the discovery process, Detective Coleman said. Right now you need to leave. Sandra stood there for another long moment, staring at the door like she could will it to open through sheer force of anger. Finally, she turned and walked back to her car. But she didn't drive away. She sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, making phone calls and gesturing animatedly. I could see her through the window, her face twisted with frustration and rage. She's calling reinforcements, I said. Detective Coleman nodded. Probably her sister, maybe some friends. People who've been hearing her version of events for 18 months and believe you're the problem. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, 3 more cars pulled up outside. Jenny got out of the first one, followed by Carla and 2 other women I recognized from Sandra's social circle. Pete emerged from the second car with 2 guys I didn't recognize. The third car disgorged Tyler and what looked like his father, a tall, thin man with Sandra's same calculating eyes. They gathered on the sidewalk in front of my house, a small mob of righteous anger and second-hand outrage. Sandra stood in the center, pointing at my windows and speaking in animated bursts that had everyone nodding and looking increasingly hostile. This is about to get ugly, Officer Martinez said, reaching for her radio. David, Jenny's voice cut through the evening air. You come out here right now and explain yourself. You can't just destroy a family because you're having some kind of breakdown. We know you're in there, Pete added. Stop hiding behind the cops and face what you've done. Detective Coleman stepped outside, her badge visible on her belt. This is a lawful protective order. Anyone who approaches this house will be arrested for criminal trespass. We're on a public sidewalk, Sandra's ex-husband called out. We have every right to be here. You have the right to be on the sidewalk, Detective Coleman agreed. You don't have the right to maltreat or intimidate anyone. The crowd grew louder, more aggressive. Someone, I think it was Carla, started shouting about how I'd brainwashed the police, how Sandra was a good mother being persecuted by a vindictive ex-husband. Then Tyler stepped forward. He's lying about everything, the kid shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. I never hurt him on purpose. Those were accidents, and he knows it. The crowd rallied around Tyler's outburst, their anger reaching a crescendo of righteous indignation. Here was a child defending himself against false accusations from a disturbed adult. Here was an innocent family being destroyed by malicious lies. It was a compelling narrative. It was also complete BS. Detective Coleman walked back inside and opened her laptop. Mr. Miller, I think it's time to educate some people. She connected the laptop to my television and pulled up the security footage from the pizza incident. The screen filled with high-definition video of Tyler approaching me with the broomstick, looking back toward the kitchen for Sandra's approval, then swinging with deliberate precision at my head. Then she opened the window and turned up the volume. The crowd on the sidewalk fell silent as Tyler's accident played out in crystal clarity. The coaching gestures from Sandra, the satisfied smiles when I went down, the complete absence of anything resembling accidental behavior. "That's not," Tyler started to say, then stopped as he recognized his own image on the screen. Detective Coleman switched to another clip, Tyler, with the baseball bat, angling his swing toward where I was standing, Sandra's directing gestures clearly visible in the background. Another clip, Tyler leaving his skateboard at the top of the stairs, then watching from around the corner as I tripped and fell. Another, Sandra whispering instructions while Tyler prepared to accidentally slam the car door on my fingers. The crowd on the sidewalk had gone completely silent. Even from inside the house, I could see the shock and confusion on their faces as 18 months of accidents revealed themselves as carefully orchestrated attacks. Finally, Detective Coleman played the audio from the bathroom. Sandra's whispered threat about aiming for my throat echoed across the evening air with perfect clarity. The silence stretched out for nearly a minute. Then, one by one, Sandra's supporters began to drift away. Carla was first, walking quickly to her car without looking back. Then the other women from Sandra's social circle, their faces carefully neutral as they avoided eye contact with anyone. Pete stood there longer, staring up at my window with an expression I couldn't quite read. Finally, he shook his head and walked back to his car. Sandra's ex-husband grabbed Tyler by the arm and started pulling him toward their vehicle. "We're leaving. Now." "But Dad," Tyler started to protest. "Now." Within 10 minutes, the sidewalk was empty, except for Sandra, standing alone beside her car. She looked up at my house one more time, her face a mask of rage and defeat. Then she got in her car and drove away. Detective Coleman closed her laptop and gathered her files. "Well, that should take care of the character witnesses," she said. "Hard to argue with video evidence. What happens next?" "Next, we build the criminal case. With this level of documentation, the DA is confident we can get convictions on both attack and conspiracy charges. Tyler will probably get juvenile detention and mandatory counseling. Sandra's looking at jail time and permanent loss of custody." After the police left, I walked through my house again, room by room. It felt different now, not just empty, but clean, like something toxic had been scrubbed away. In the bathroom, I turned on the shower and let the water run hot. For the first time in 18 months, I didn't check over my shoulder before stepping under the spray. The water ran clear, warm, and safe. No blood, no threats, no whispered promises of escalating violence. Just clean water, washing away the last traces of a nightmare that had finally ended. But as I stood there in the steam, I couldn't shake Detective Coleman's warning about desperate people doing desperate things. Sandra's plan had been methodical, calculated, patient. Her revenge, when it came, would probably be the same. The attacks started 3 days later, but they weren't physical this time. Sandra had learned from her mistakes. My phone rang at 6 a.m. with a call from my biggest renovation client, Mrs. Henderson, whose kitchen remodel I'd been working on for 2 months. "David, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to terminate our contract," she said without preamble. "I've heard some very disturbing things about your home situation, and I just can't have someone with a history of violence working in my house." "Mrs. Henderson, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "I heard you had your own stepson arrested, that you threw a child out of his home over some minor accidents. I have grandchildren, David. I can't take the risk." She hung up before I could explain. 20 minutes later, another client called with the same story, then another. By noon, I'd lost 4 contracts worth nearly $30,000 in work. Sandra was making her rounds, spreading her version of the story to anyone who would listen. And people were listening because her version was simpler, more emotionally satisfying than the complicated truth about systematic misuse and video evidence. Her version had a clear villain, the unstable stepfather who'd destroyed an innocent family. My doorbell rang at 2 p.m. I opened it to find a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd seen everything twice. "Mr. Miller? I'm Margaret Patel from Child Protective Services. I understand there's been an incident involving your stepson." I invited her in and spent an hour walking through the documentation, the video evidence, the medical records. Ms. Patel reviewed everything with professional thoroughness, taking notes and asking pointed questions about timeline, escalation patterns, and my decision to install security cameras. "This is very comprehensive," she said finally. "And frankly, it's exactly the kind of evidence we wish we saw more often in these cases." "So you believe me?" "Mr. Miller, I've been doing this job for 22 years. I know the difference between a vindictive adult making false accusations and a genuine sufferer with solid documentation. What you've shown me is textbook systematic misuse with clear escalation toward potentially lethal violence." She closed her file and leaned back in her chair. "I have to ask, though, have you had any contact with Tyler since the protective order was issued?" "None. Why?" "Because his mother filed a complaint yesterday claiming that you've been maltreating him, calling his school, following him around town, making threats." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "That's not true. I didn't think it was, but I had to ask." She stood up and gathered her files. "Mr. Miller, I want you to be very careful over the next few weeks. When people lose custody cases, especially cases involving criminal charges, they sometimes get desperate, and desperate people make poor decisions." After she left, I called Detective Coleman. "Sandra's filing false reports now," I told her, "claiming I'm maltreating Tyler. We expected that. It's a common tactic. Try to make the sufferer look like the aggressor. Don't worry about it. We have your phone records, your credit card statements, your security footage. We can prove you've been nowhere near the kid." "What about my work? She's calling my clients, telling them I'm violent." "That's maltreatment, and it's probably defamation. You might want to talk to a lawyer about a civil suit." A lawyer. More complications, more expenses, more time spent dealing with the fallout from 18 months of systematic misuse. But Detective Coleman was right. Sandra wasn't going to stop with criminal charges hanging over her head. She was going to keep attacking, keep trying to destroy my reputation, my business, my life. Two could play that game. I spent the evening researching Sandra's real estate career, looking for any irregularities, any complaints, any hint of the calculating manipulation I'd experienced firsthand. What I found was interesting. 3 complaints filed with the state licensing board over the past 2 years. All from clients who claimed Sandra had misrepresented properties, hidden defects, or pressured them into bad deals. All dismissed due to lack of evidence. But the pattern was there. Sandra Walsh was a woman who bent rules, manipulated situations, and left a trail of unhappy people in her wake. I started making phone calls. The first client, a retired teacher named Robert Kim, was happy to talk once I explained who I was. "Oh, you're the husband," he said. "I heard about what happened. Sandra called me yesterday, actually, asking if I'd be a character witness for her custody hearing." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I wouldn't testify for someone who cost me $15,000 in undisclosed repairs." She hung up pretty quickly after that. The second client, Maria Santos, had a similar story. Sandra knew about the foundation problems and didn't tell us. We found out during the inspection, but by then we'd already put down earnest money and she pressured us not to back out. Said the problems were minor, easily fixed. How minor were they? $28,000 to fix. And Sandra disappeared the day we closed, wouldn't return our calls when we tried to file a complaint. By the end of the week, I'd spoken to 8 of Sandra's former clients. All had similar stories of manipulation, misrepresentation, and abandonment when problems arose. All were willing to provide statements about Sandra's character and business practices. I compiled everything into a comprehensive file and delivered it to Detective Coleman. "This is good work," she said, reviewing the statements. "It establishes a clear pattern of manipulative behavior that supports our theory about the systematic misuse." "What about the maltreatment?" "She's still calling my clients." "Actually, that stopped yesterday. Her lawyer probably told her to knock it off before she gets charged with witness intimidation." "Her lawyer?" "Sandra hired legal representation. Big firm downtown, specializes in family law and criminal defense. They're going to fight this hard." That evening, my doorbell rang again. Through the peephole, I could see a man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. "Mr. Miller, I'm James Crawford, representing Sandra Walsh. I'd like to discuss a possible resolution to this unfortunate situation." I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "What kind of resolution?" "My client is willing to admit that there may have been some miscommunication about Tyler's behavior. She's prepared to apologize and seek family counseling in exchange for you dropping the criminal charges." Miscommunication. Boys can be rough, Mr. Miller. Sometimes what looks intentional is really just adolescent clumsiness. Perhaps the situation got blown out of proportion. I closed the door in his face. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Detective Coleman. Sandra's lawyer just called the DA's office, she said. They're claiming you're refusing to cooperate with a reasonable settlement offer. 18 months of systematic misuse isn't a miscommunication. I know that, you know that, but juries sometimes have trouble with cases where the sufferer is an adult male and the perpetrator is a teenage boy. Sandra's lawyer is going to play up the David versus Goliath angle, make you look like a grown man picking on a child. We have video evidence. We do, but video can be interpreted different ways, and Sandra's lawyer is very good at creating reasonable doubt. I felt that cold sensation in my stomach again. Are you saying we might lose? I'm saying we need to be prepared for a fight. Sandra's not going to go quietly, and she's hired someone who knows how to make sufferers look like villains. After she hung up, I walked through my house again, room by room. It still felt clean, still felt safe, but now there was something else in the air. Uncertainty. Sandra had 18 months to plan her attack on me. Now she had expensive legal representation and nothing left to lose. But she'd made one crucial mistake in her calculations. She'd forgotten that I'd spent 12 years documenting trauma for court cases. I knew how to build evidence that would stand up under cross-examination. I knew how to present medical facts in ways that juries could understand, and I knew how to be patient. Sandra wanted a fight. She was about to get one. But this time, I was ready.